All right, so I've been praying for about 4 years concerning the true biblical location of Israel and the true people. Now, a problem that we have is people go in and they research and this kind of thing, but they do it by their own carnal mind and they're not led by the Spirit concerning it. And so what ends up happening is they basically take pieces from here and there and there and they mash it all together and they're like, this is what the truth is, even though the Father is not confirming what the truth is. So a few years back, right before I left to go to East Africa in 2023, the Father gave me a dream of a white glowing cross over East Africa. So the cross is also the Taw, which is the Hebrew letter, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it represents the end, but it also represents the mark of the covenant. Can you tell me why the Father would give me a dream of a symbol of the mark of the covenant over East Africa? Well, it's because that land is the biblical land of God. That land is Israel. And I'm also praying to see if even parts of South Africa are also the biblical land of Israel. There seems to be some current backlash against the Book of Jubilees coming from multiple people. And I can only say that this is by design, because the fact of the matter is the Gentiles are trying to erase and replace the history of the Israelites, even though they do not have the power or the authority to do so. They are not Israelites, they are Gentiles, and even an Israelite would not have the power or the authority to do so. We are not to add or take away from the Word of God. So the Book of Jubilees actually gives the land divisions of Shem, Japheth, and Ham. I very much believe this is why they are trying to say that, it's no longer relevant, that the Jews didn't use it, even though it was a part of the Apocrypha and the Torah at one point. Anyone who is trying to control what you read, you should pray to God about it. Because one of the things that they used to do in slavery days is tell the slaves that they could not read while simultaneously calling them fools. The Catholic Church went into South America and Central America and burned their books. They did this to keep them ignorant of spiritual matters. So don't think that these people have your best interest in mind when they're trying to say, oh no, don't read the Book of Jubilees. Oh no, don't read the extra biblical text. The fact of the matter is they want to control the knowledge, and if they can control the knowledge, then they can control people. But thank God we have a direct connection with God, so He can tell us what to read and what not to read, what's true and what not is true. Okay, these people are not gods. They are not lords over you, but they do want to lord over you because they are getting benefits from your ignorance. So this is a map of East Africa. I would say that this glowing cross was somewhere between Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan, and Ethiopia, but I can't quite remember. I just know that it was there. So the Israeli people, the reason why they are in the land that they are in is because they are Jewish converts. They got approval by the Rothschilds to set up in that land, but they initially were actually going to set up in Kenya under the Ugandan scheme. I always speculated about that because I'm like, why there out of any other place? Well, I think they knew that the true biblical Holy Land was much of East Africa. So here is the land division according to the Book of Jubilees. This is Jubilees 8. And there came forth on the writing as Shem's lot the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons, for the generations of eternity, from the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the water, from the river Tina. So they say that there is actually a Tina River in South Africa. They say that the Rapha mountain range is closer to Central Africa, but I also have to do more research. I'm still praying to God about the land, these landmarks, because the truth is they took the maps and they changed the names of these landmarks. That's why they actually go into these foreign lands and they actually occupy them, and then they name them after whoever they want to name them. This is done purposely to erase the history. So it says, and his portion goeth toward the west through the midst of this river, and it extendeth till it reacheth the water of the abysses, out of which this river goeth forth, and poureth its waters into the sea Maat. Well, looking at Maat, what I found is that it's a sea that's up towards northern Africa. So if all this is true, then there is actually a pretty great portion of Africa that belongs to Shem. Now, Shem is the forefather of the Israelites. So there are many different types of Shemites. There's several different types of Hebrews, and then there's the Israelites, and they were all apportioned their own plots of land. So it naturally makes sense that the land of Shem would be bigger than the land of the Israelites. So it says, and all that is toward the north is Japheth, and all that is toward the south belongs to Shem. And if Japheth's land is indeed Europe, then wouldn't it make sense that Shem's land, which is towards the south, is Africa? That would be the closest portion. And it extended till it reached Carasso. This is in the bosom of the tongue which looketh toward the south. And his portion extended along the great sea, and it extended in a straight line till it reacheth the west of the tongue which looketh toward the south. For this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And it turneth from here toward the south, the mouth of the great sea on the shore of its waters, and it extended to the west of Afra. So Afra could be Africa. It also could be afar. And it extended till it reacheth the waters of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon to the banks of this river. So the river Gihon is actually the Nile River. Now, I initially thought the Nile River started in Egypt. That is not true. Secondly, I found out that it started in Lake Victoria, which is the body of water that is in between Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya. But if you actually look at ancient maps, you will see that the Nile River starts from South Central Africa. So looking at this map here, you will see Nilus A flowing from, I don't know if it's called Zaire Lacus or Zimbre Lacus, but this is actually where the Nile River originates. That I know of right now. I might find out something later, right? If you zoom out, you will see that this body of water is a little bit lower than Lake Victoria, which is the body of water that's to the right there. So this is actually flowing up from Central Africa. Now, of course, there's tributaries of the Nile River, so it does go into Lake Victoria, or it flows up from Lake Victoria as well. Now, if the river Gihon is flowing from this place, it would seem to me that the land of Shem is much bigger than what we think. So if you look at Genesis 15:18, it actually confirms this right there in the 66 books. On the same day, Yah made a covenant with Abraham, saying, I have given this land to your seed, from the river of Mitzrayim, aka the Gihon, to the great river, the river Euphrates. Now, there of course is a Euphrates that's in the Middle East, in which they state is that river. There is also a river Euphrates that's in West Africa, and this is also known as the Niger River. However, it is yet to be revealed which is the true Euphrates. This is something that the Portuguese apparently named the Euphrates, but again, I'm praying to God about it for the truth. And it extended toward the east till it reaches the Garden of Eden, to the south thereof, to the south, and from the east of the whole land of Eden, and of the whole cast it turneth to the east. So some people are stating that the Garden of Eden is in a desert somewhere in the Middle East. I cannot find any kind of extra biblical text or biblical text that states that the Garden of Eden would ever become a desert. So we have to look at the lush lands of the world and apply it there. And it proceedeth till it reacheth the east of the mountain named Rapha, and it descended to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever unto his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons, and he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy, for he had said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and may the Lord dwell in the dwelling of Shem. So the Lord will dwell in Shem, okay? It does not matter if they are Esau, It doesn't matter if they are Israel. It doesn't matter if they are Ishmael or the Assyrians, etc. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies and the dwelling of the Lord in Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. And he blessed the God of gods, who had put the word of the Lord into his mouth, and the Lord forevermore. And he knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever. So here we have a depiction of the ancient Chaldeans. This is the land in which Abraham grew up in. As you can see, these men are depicted very dark skin, kinky, curly black hair. So who we call the people in this area today, they are possibly people that came from the north, but they are not the original inhabitants of these lands. This is the oldest depiction of Abraham ever found. As you can see, he looks very similar to this group of people. He is very dark skinned and he has curly hair. Now, I do think that he is older in this depiction, hence why his hair looks gray. And then that is his son Isaac. Now, this area would be present-day Iraq, etc. And this is actually the ancient civilization of Iraq, which falls right in line with those previous photos. So continuing, it says the whole land of Eden and the whole land of the Red Sea and the whole land of the East and India. So I've actually been to India before, and there's a place called Goa in India that is actually mentioned in the Bible. Now, when I went there, I wasn't a believer in Christ. I was doing the New Age stuff, and I ended up in Goa. And let me tell you, the smiles on these people's faces was way different than any other part of India that I've been to. I found out years later that Goa is actually around 70% Christian. There are also Hebrews and Israelites that actually left East Africa and went to India. They are called the Siddhis. So the land of Shem was much bigger than what we think it was. And continuing, it says, and on the Red Sea and the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and all the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Caphtor, and all the mountains of Senir and Ammana. Well, fun fact, the word Ammana in Hebrew, this also means let it be. I don't like to say amen because amen is also the name of an Egyptian god, Amun or Amon. And so I definitely believe that the churches are saying this to give credence to this fallen god. And the mountains of Ashur in the north, and all the land of Elam, Ashur, and Babel, and Susan, and Madai, and all the mountains of Ararat. Another fun fact, there is actually a Mount Ararat in South Africa. And all the regions beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur, towards the north, a blessed and spacious land, and all that is in it is very good. And for Ham came forth the second portion beyond the Gihon toward the south to the right of the garden, and it extended toward the south. And it extended all to all the mountains of fire, and it extended towards the west to the sea of Atel, and it extended toward the west till it reacheth the sea of Maak, that sea into which everything which is not destroyed descendeth. And it goeth forth toward the north to the limits of Gadir, and it goeth forth to the coast of the waters of the sea, to the waters of the great sea, till it draweth near to the river Gihon. We're talking about a land portion of Shem that's on one side of the Gihon, and a land portion of Ham that's on the other side of the Gihon. So I think what we have here is that Africa is actually split between Shem and Ham in accordance to the Nile River. Now remember where the Nile River flows up from. It flows up from Central Africa. So the land portion of Shem, I believe, is possibly maybe 1/3 of Africa, and the land division of Ham is possibly maybe 2/3. Now that's just my own opinion, don't quote me on that. Now this is an excerpt from Jubilees 10. And Ham and his sons went into the land which he was to occupy, which he acquired as his portion in the land of the south. And Canaan saw that the land of Lebanon to the river of Egypt, it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west, that is, to the sea. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward, from the border of Jordan, and from the border of the sea. Fun fact, I did my DNA, and my heritage comes from Sidon and Siphi, Lebanon, and in parentheses it put Israel. So I do believe that this is a portion of Israel, but it is not as small as what the Israelis are inheriting right now, rather stole. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon eastward and westward from the border of Jordan and from the border of the sea. And Ham his father and Cush and Mitzrayim his brothers said unto him, Thou hast settled in a land which is not thine. So this land of Canaan was not actually the land of Canaan. The Hamites were given the land that was west of the Nile River. So I believe that is actually West Africa and further down to the south of West Africa. What they did was usurp the land from Shem, and so they dwelt in Shemitic land. And Ham his father and Cush and Mitzrayim his brothers said unto him, Thou hast settled in a land which is not thine, and which did not fall to us by lot. So they actually did righteously in telling Canaan that he is not supposed to settle in that land. And I think this is part of the curse of Canaan. Now, people try to say, oh, Ham is cursed. No, it was Canaan that was cursed for what Ham did. They said, Do not do so, for if thou dost do so, thou and thy sons will fall in the land and be accursed through sedition. So sedition means to rebel against established authority. Could possibly mean to rebel against God. And by sedition will thy children fall, and thou shalt be rooted out forever. Now, to be rooted out means that you will be rooted out concerning God. This is possibly why the Canaanites were cursed to become slaves forever. Dwell not in the dwelling of Shem, for to Shem and to his sons did it come by their lot. So this is also the reason why many of these nations are going to be dealt with, because God gave land divisions concerning Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And what nations have done is they have gone in and occupied, and you know, the whole situation also with Manifest Destiny and China trying to imperialize Africa, etc. All these nations will be rooted out of the places in which they did not originate. So, you know, I believe there is a reason why Trump is sending immigrants back to where they came from. And, you know, we have this debate that's happening, I believe, on May 15th between this ex-Lutheran and another guy. And they're debating whether black people can be saved and if white people are to rule over them. Because this guy is claiming that white people are more spiritual. And one of the things he said was he thinks that we should be deported back to Africa. Let me just tell you, if your whole existence is about taking people, about money, about making laws for your benefit, you're not a spiritual people. We don't need your authority or your guidance. And so, you know, while it's easy to be mad about what the man is saying, because obviously we're the Israelites and they're not, they're Gentiles, at the same time, it's a part of them trying to have control for the future, to dominate. I believe that there's going to be something with the Catholic Church at some point where they are going to try to rule over everything, which is why Trump is making all these laws, these Christian laws, and all the Gentiles are like, yeah, Trump's making all these Christian laws, and not understanding it's not for your benefit. It's for world domination, because we know that the Catholic Church went in and changed a whole bunch of laws of God. You know, they introduced Easter, the worship of Ishtar. They introduced Christmas, the worship of Mithras. They are the ones that popularized Mother's Day, which was the worship of deities such as Rhea and Cybele, Roman gods. This is the Roman religion. So I was excited a little bit, though, because I'm like, deported back to Africa? You mean the land that we came from, that you stole us from? That would be great if we got a free ticket back to Israel, where we came from. So, you know, I think it is somewhat of a cover-up. They don't want anyone to know that God is the one doing these things. That's why they're making up stuff. Oh, the solar flares and the climate change. No, what's happening is the judgment of the earth because of its atrocities against humanity. It's atrocities against God. It's atrocities against God's people. So you also have this uproar that's happening in South Africa. Now, Trump just recently gave free land to the Boers. If that doesn't tell you where their allegiance lies, I don't know what does. Like I said earlier, they went into these lands and changed the name of the lands to whatever languages that they were speaking in order to erase the history. That was done on purpose. They took that land from those people, made all these laws and sanctions so that the people could not have access to their own lands, and now they're getting free land. Why does America even have the authority to give free land from Africa? Well, someone said recently that America actually owns South Africa. I don't know if that's true or not, but the fact of the matter is, when God does what he does, those people are going to be uprooted out the land. God is going to put whom he gave the land to back in that area, which would be the Shemites and the Hamites, and then everyone has to go back to where they came from. All these Americans that you see here, this is not our land, okay? This land belongs to the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incans. And, it's still up in the air about the Native Americans. They still have a haplotype that actually goes to Northeast Asia and Central Asia, and also Europe. So understand that these lands will be returned to us and their land will be returned to them. With no further ado, I have found some videos pertaining to Kenya actually being part of the land of Canaan. Now, what's interesting with when you go into these lands, this is why I went to East Africa in the first place, to try to research and ask the locals personally. Because of the cover-up of history and because of the lack of voice that these people have, sometimes we don't know what the truth is, which is why it's to your benefit to go and do your own research. So there are people in Kenya that still call their land Canaan. I also met a few men from the tribe of Luya, which is in West Kenya. One of them, I spoke to him about the Israelites. He had no idea what I was talking about. I think the man was more so on a journey concerning money. The other man, however, knew what I was talking about, and he said, yes, we do descend from the children of Israel. First, we're going to start with a video. I believe the name of this group is actually called Kenya Canaan. You have to ask yourself, why are they relating Kenya with Canaan?
Kaya ke do vedra dwake moy me misri mage ke kanni horori molaka bina oke nairia sheni duru nairma toigoro re bata onate nwere bata.
Currently, we have many East Africans, especially Kenyans and South Africans, that are coming out and they are stating that their lands are biblical holy places. This is an excerpt from a group, and their name is Zelatels, and they are actually giving you land divisions and landmarks that are in the Bible concerning Kenya being Canaan.
Could it be that the ancient land of Canaan, referred in the Bible, is actually located in Kenya? While it might sound far-fetched, there are some intriguing connections worth investigating. In this series, we'll take an objective look at the evidence, biblical texts, archaeological finds, and natural geography to see if this claim holds any merit. We'll let you decide for yourself. Mount Nebo or Mount Elgon. Our journey begins at Mount Elgon, a towering peak in the Kenya-Uganda border. Some researchers and enthusiasts have proposed that Mount Elgon could be the biblical Mount Nebo, the place where Moses saw the promised land before the Israelites crossed into Canaan. According to this theory, Kenya could be that very land. But what's the basis for this claim? Let's look at this biblical passage from Joshua 3:14 to 16. So it was, when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, that the waters, which came down from upstream, stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zeratan. Proponents of this theory suggest that Adam could correspond to Endebes, a town at the foot of Mount Elgon. They argue that the Jordan River in this village is actually the Nzoia River, which runs nearby. But can the geography of this region really fit the biblical description? Let's explore the possibilities. Mount Elgon, like many mountains, is prone to landslides, natural events that can block rivers and change landscapes dramatically. During flooding seasons, the Nzoia River can swell and overflow, much like the Jordan in the Bible. Some suggest that a landslide could have blocked the river, creating a temporary dam that allowed the Israelites to cross. While this is plausible, is it enough to definitively link these locations to the biblical narrative? That's still up for debate. Farther downstream, the Takwel River flows into Lake Turkana, a large saline body of water. Could this be the biblical Sea of Arabah? The geography does seem to align, but again, the evidence is mostly circumstantial. For now, it remains an interesting theory, one that deserves more thorough investigation. Biblical names in modern Kenya. One of the most striking claims made by those who support this theory is that modern Kenyan towns carry biblical names, altered slightly over time. For example, Kericho is proposed to be Jericho, Gilgil to be Gilgal, and Elbagon to be Mount Ebal. Would these similarities in names be a clue, or are they just coincidences? Names do change over time, and it's possible that ancient names could have been preserved in some form. But it is also worth considering that these names could have evolved independently of any biblical connections. As we delve deeper, it is important to approach the claims with caution. There is often a temptation to see connections where none exist, especially when dealing with ancient texts that are open to interpretation. In the area of Gilgil, said to be biblical Gilgal, archaeologists, including the renowned Richard Leakey, have uncovered thousands of ancient tools. Would these be remnants of the Israelites' camp after they crossed the Jordan? Perhaps, but without direct evidence linking these tools to the biblical narrative, the connection remains speculative. The fall of Jericho, or Kericho. One of the most well-known stories from the Bible is the fall of Jericho, where the Israelites marched around the city for 7 days before its walls collapsed. According to this theory, Kericho is the real Jericho, and its location along fault lines in the Rift Valley could explain how the city's walls came tumbling down after sustained pressure from the Israelites' march and the sound of their trumpets. But does this explanation hold up under scrutiny? While it's true that fault lines can weaken structures, there is no definitive evidence that this was the cause of Jericho's fall, if Kericho is even Jericho at all. The connection is intriguing, but far from conclusive. And while local legends and biblical stories can sometimes intersect, it is important to separate fact from tradition. Could this be an ancient city tied to biblical events, or is it simply another example of geological activity? The evidence, at least for now, remains thin. The role of archaeology and suppression of evidence? Some proponents of this theory believe that much of Kenya's ancient history has been deliberately hidden. They point to archaeological expeditions by the British, including Richard Leakey's work, as evidence that foreign powers knew about Kenya's biblical significance, but kept this information from the public. But is this really the case, or are we simply looking at the normal challenges of piecing together ancient history? It's true that much of Africa's archaeological record has been disrupted by colonization, and many important artifacts are removed or lost. But without more concrete evidence, it is difficult to say whether this was part of a deliberate cover-up or just the unfortunate result of history. The idea that Kenya is the true Canaan remains an open question, and while there are tantalizing clues, it's important not to jump to conclusions. As we've seen today, the theory that Kenya is the true biblical land of Canaan is certainly fascinating, but it raises more questions than answers. Could Mount Elgon really be Mount Nebo? Could the Nzoia River be the Jordan? And are Kenyan towns really the remnants of ancient biblical cities? For now, we don't have definitive proof, but the evidence is worth exploring further. In the next episode, we'll dive even deeper into these connections, examining more sites across Kenya and their potential ties to the biblical story. If you're curious to see where this journey leads, be sure to subscribe to Zile Tales and join us as we continue to investigate the mysteries of ancient Canaan. Until next time.
Next, this is a video of some locals that call their land Canaan, and the region is Kibera. This is in Kenya. Now this is a video from Code Africa. They do little shorts on YouTube, and they also are giving landmarks and biblical destinations concerning Canaan.
Gilgil is a Kenyan town of great biblical significance. The name originates from the Bantu word meaning rolling or turning. It was at Gilgal that the Hebrews set up their first camp in Canaan, and where God instructed Joshua regarding circumcision. Gilgal became the military base from where they launched attacks on Jericho and other Canaanite cities. According to the Bible, Gilgal lay east of Jericho and north of the Kinangop Valley, forming a boundary between Judah and Benjamin. In the Bible, Gilgal signifies places of transition, where circles of stones were erected as memorials. Archaeological findings at Elementaita prove Gilgal was a factory for knives and weapons, many of which were displayed in European museums. Cambridge University has 250 samples of these artifacts, showcasing the historic importance of Gilgal.
So this land is the land of Canaan, or it is part of the land of Canaan at least, and this is the land in which the Canaanites stole from Shem. This is the place in which God set Abraham up in and set Israel up in. And the truth is coming out. So of course, you know, the powers that be and their foot soldiers have to do what they can to try to slow the truth from coming out. And so you have, of course, the church, which really is, it seems to have a really large white supremacy complex to it. This is why these men are about to debate with one another, because apparently they think that for some reason, well, one of the guys thinks that for some reason that whiteness is equated with spirituality. Now, I believe that there are white people that are spiritual, but I believe as a whole, no, that is not the case. Again, when your whole nation just simply wants to rule and wants material gain and will put people in slavery, such as the Congolese. The Belgians came over to the Congo and they used the Bible to actually subdue these people. The missionaries came over. The Belgians told them, hey, look, teach them parts of the Bible. The missionaries stated they already know God. The Belgians replied, well, teach them the parts about the slaves obeying their masters, but they ignored the portion which stated that the masters are to be kind to their slaves. There was an Ethiopian girl a few years ago, I saw her on TikTok, and she said churches were being set up in Ethiopia not for the glory of God, but so they can actually gentrify those areas. A spiritual people do not do such things. When you use God for your benefit with no will to actually submit to Him, then you are not the children of God. This is the same reason why King Bulan in Khazaria converted his nation into Judaism. These are the same people that live in Israel today, part of them. Some of them, like Ashkenaz, are actually descended from Onkelos, who was a Roman convert. His family, the Kalanimus family, moved into Rhineland, and that's how you get your modern German Jews. So it's a combination between the Khazarians, aka the Ukrainians, and the Romans, and the Greeks and the Cyprians, etc., those who were in the Byzantine Empire that actually are in Israel today. Now what they are trying to do is try to have control over our spirituality. That's a major issue, mostly for them, because God is about to slap the rocks out of them. They don't know what they have gotten themselves into. But as people have been saying, they know that their rulership is coming to an end. As it says in, I believe it's the book of Maccabees. If it's not Maccabees, it might be Jasher. But it states that Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning. So there's been a lot of back and forth concerning who Esau is. So you have this map concerning haplotypes. Now, someone said Esau is the R1b haplotype. Did you know it is actually illegal for the Israelis to get DNA tests done? And I very much believe that is for a reason. So you have the R1b haplotype. And like I said, they're associating this with Esau. If you look in the middle of Africa, you will see that haplotype. There are 3 tribes in Africa: the Edo, the Isan, and the Edoma. All right. There have been people of these tribes that have literally said that they are the descendants of Esau. Now, you will also find this haplotype in Europe, mostly in, your Mediterranean areas. It seems to be a little bit up north as well. As I said previously, these people from the Byzantine Empire, that's where you get your core of Jewry, okay? And they even say it in their own text. The non-Israelite Edomites became a section of the Jewish people. Encyclopedia Judaica, Volume 6, page 378. They, the non-Israelite Edomites, were then incorporated with the Jewish nation. Edom, Idumea, the Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume B, page 41. So this is actually where folks like King Herod came from, and also some of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Here you can find ancient DNA concerning both Ashkenaz and Sepharad. Here they are closest to the Byzantine, the Hellenic Roman, the Byzantine plus the Hellenic Roman, the Byzantine plus Roman, the Hellenic Roman plus the Roman, the Seleucid, the Hellenic Roman, the Byzantine, the Carian. So Edom is actually responsible for founding Rome. This is why you have your Catholic Church, and why you have these Jews that are in cahoots with the Catholic Church, and why you have your modern churches that still practice the same practices as the Catholic Church. So again, who is Esau? Well, it's going to be your Byzantines as Kittim, which is Cyprus, took over Edom. Edom founded Rome. It's going to be those three tribes I mentioned earlier. And if you also look to the right here, you have your Turkmen. These are the ones that actually went into the Ukraine. These are the Khazarians. Well, you have your Sephardic Jews, which are close to the Azeri. The Azeri are actually Turkmen, according to their male DNA. But their closest ancient group seems to be the Sicilian plus the Canaanite / Semites. So the Sicilian, obviously Edomites, the Canaanites, sons of Ham, and then some kind of generic Semite, not sure which one. Now, for some reason, they put Amorite at the top, even though it's not their closest, but the Amorites were the descendants of Canaan. Does that mean that they are descendants of Canaan? Not necessarily, but they are taking from a bloodline which they are calling Canaan. We know that they're Sicilian, and we know that they're also Turks. And they also have the Byzantine bloodline there. So one of the things, especially Black Hebrew Israelite groups try to say is that all white people are Esau. I don't agree. At the top here, you have the R1A haplotype. It's the lighter blue, the lighter, I would say closer to purple blue. There's another blue, and that one's a little more green. Perhaps it is that they have some Edomite blood, these guys, but it's not as much as what these ones in the Mediterranean and the Turkmen do. And then you have the Balkans and the Scandinavians. It looks like they are possibly I1 and I2. So no, not all white people are Edom. It is a select few. We're talking about your Jews, we're talking about your Spaniards, your Greeks, your Turkmen, your Romans, etc. And I very much believe these are those who are claiming Israelite blood but are not actually Israelites. That's obvious with the Jews. However, a lot less obvious groups are the Brits. So there seems to be this doctrine coming out that Queen Elizabeth was a descendant of Judah. Again, they are using these things to try to continue rulership. Now, the crown, I was actually in Kenya in 2023, and they actually came to Kenya to set them free. That doesn't say that you're not trying to dominate the Israelites, then I don't know what does. Now, I also want you to notice that Israel is blocked out from this haplotype map. And that's for good reason, because they're not actually the Israelites, but luckily we were able to find their male DNA in their closest ancient groups. Rather, praise be to God. Now, the other part to that is, since the church has taken on the likeness of Edom, they are actually Edom as well. That's why oftentimes you will not see them going into neighborhoods that are black, except for gentrification purposes. All in all, many of them actually look down upon black people. They are not doing anything to save anyone but themselves and their own. So you have the E1A and the E1B haplotype. Now, I have most my points in Kenya. That's where most of my ancestry comes from. A little bit more, a little bit less, in Tanzania, a little bit less in Uganda. Now, this tribe called the Taita tribe came up on YouTube, and I started to learn about them. The other name is Dawida. So this is one of my clans in Scotland. So this is another thing they're trying to use. Oh, well, there were all these clans and the Israelites were there. Not understanding that, yes, the Israelites were there, the Edomites were also there, the Moors were also there, and that these people actually had African haplotypes. So here's my connection to the Taita Taveta. Closest clan is the clan Kirkpatrick. What are these Kenyans doing with the last name Kirkpatrick? I could not tell you, but that was their last name, and they had the haplotype E1B1A. E1B1B1A. So they definitely are descendants of Africa. Let's not forget that during the Spanish Inquisition, the Portuguese Jews, who were called Negro, in fact, one of the family's names were called Yaya Negro, refused to mix with the other Jews up in Rhineland. They probably knew what the assignment was, but these Jews, the Portuguese and the Spanish Jews, were said to look like the native Africans, and they were also casted out of Europe at one point because the Catholic Church was spreading and didn't want anything to do with true Christianity or Judaism. And where did they flee into? Well, they fled into Morocco. In fact, I went to Chefchaouen, Morocco, which is where the Jews built their city. They painted the whole city, all these really beautiful shades of blue. People are all like, we don't know why they painted it blue. I will tell you why they painted it blue, because blue was in the tzitzit in which God commanded them to wear. They fled into Morocco. They went into parts of West Africa. That's why in West Africa you have a land called Ouida. I actually recently found these pictures of the inhabitants of this land, Ouida, which is also called Judah. As you can see, they definitely look like what you would call quote-unquote native Africans. I do not see any instance of blonde hair. I don't see any instance of green eyes, blue eyes, nothing. And as you can see, there are actually fringes on the bottom of this lady's garments. Just like there are fringes on the bottom of the garment of this woman from the Taita, aka the tribe of Dawida in Kenya. An account of Timbuktu and Hausa territories in the interior of Africa. Page 187, Yehudi, a place of great trade. This place is reported to be inhabited by one of the lost tribes of Israel, possibly an immigration from the tribe of Judah. Yehuda in African Arabic signifies Judah. Yehudi signifies Jew. It is not impossible that many of the lost tribes of Israel may be found dispersed in the interior regions of Africa when we shall become better acquainted with that continent. It is certain that some of the nations that possess the country eastward of Palestine, when the Israelites were a favored nation, have immigrated to Africa. Not only did they immigrate, they're from there. So this is from a mission to Jilili, king of Dahom, with notices of the so-called Amazons, the grand customs, the yearly customs, the human sacrifices, the present state of the slave trade, and the Negro's place in nature. So this is interesting that this is being talked about right now, the Negro's place in nature. That's why you have people who have no business talking about us that are trying to decide what our place is. But nonetheless, this book was written by a man named Sir Francis Richard Burton. He was a French geographer. Handed to each of us, and we were desired to throw it away to the fetish whom may Allah blight. The land around is called Leflefum, from the Nago people, whose chief Chade was slain by King Jezo, and who were finally settled here. The eye dwells with delight upon the numerous country villages like the 115 towns of the tribe of Judah, and upon the thin forest of palms rising from the tapestry of herbage, here waving, their cut short, which combine to make this spot the Frado, or the paradise of the homeland. So there's 115 towns of the tribe of Judah in this area of the slave coast of West Africa, and guess where they were taking slaves from? You guessed it. They were taking slaves from the tribe of Judah, and actually Dahom is actually Dan and Komi, which is the tribe of Dan. So it was actually the Israelites that were selling each other into slavery, including my other tribe, which are called the Yoruba, or Yoruba. So really there's nothing new under the sun. We know that they sold Joseph into slavery as well. It could be why the Zulu were actually capturing people to be sold as well. The Zulu are the sons of Guni, along with the Kosa, the Debile, and the Lesotho, and there might be other tribes involved with that. But Guni is also the son of Naphtali. So these are the descendants of Naphtali down in South Africa, which is possibly why they're having the issues that they're having today. So let the conclusion of the matter be, wake up, Israel. Your time is near. The reason why you have been going through all this is because of the sins of your forefathers as well as your own sins. There's a reason why movies like Sinners have come out. There's a reason why the Mufasa movie has come out. We know that the Lion King was based over there in either Kenya or Tanzania. They use that emblem everywhere. You go into cafes in Tanzania and there's a huge lion painted inside the cafe. The Lion King is literally a story about a prodigal son. You have forgotten who you are, Simba. You need to go back to where you came from to rule. And it's so funny when Rafiki is talking to Simba. And Simba says, the winds are changing. And then Rafiki replies, very peculiar, eh? Why? Because the winds are changing and we are called a peculiar people. They say Africa arise, but it's actually Israel arise. And so understand, while they may do everything to try to bring you down, their time is up. The time of the Gentiles is being fulfilled.